Hello everyone. Now today we'll discuss about relation between rural and urban settlement. Now before starting with the relation, first of all, let's recall what we have studied or discussed in the previous two chapters. So if you remember, we discussed about settlement. What is settlement? When people live in a particular place permanently, that is known as settlement. Then we also discuss about that we have two types of settlement. They are rural and urban. These are the two types of settlement. Further, rural and urban settlement are divided into like nucleated settlement, dispersed settlement, star settlement, square settlement, linear settlement. Then we also discuss about urban settlement. Urban settlement means the settlement that we found in towns, or which is also known as municipal settlement. And rural settlement means people who have settled down in villages. Now these two settlements are based on what? You remember? That is, rural settlement is based on agricultural activities, whereas urban settlement is based on non-agricultural activities. Then we also discuss about the characteristics of both rural and urban settlement. Now, the characteristics of rural and urban settlement can be also used to distinguish or to find out the differences between rural and urban settlement. Now today, as I have already written here, that we'll discuss about relation between rural and urban settlement. But before starting with this, now at present 70% of the population in developed countries are found in urban settlement. Say, for example, developed countries like USA, Canada, or England. There you'll find that 70% of the population lives in urban areas. But in country like India, only 30% of the population lives in urban areas, whereas in India 70% lives in rural areas. Now, although there are many differences between rural and urban settlement, but there is a very strong linkage between urban and rural settlement. Because most of the towns and cities in the world are being born out of villages only. If you see the major towns of Assam, suppose for example Dibrugarh, Tejpur, Guwahati. Now all these towns are beside the river Brahmaputra, and these were once villages that turn out to be now present towns. Also London on the bank of the river Thames. Then we have Baghdad on the bank of the river Tigris. So likewise, most of the towns and cities that we have in the present time were born out of villages. Now, the relation. What connects town and villages? Now, first thing, trade and commerce, that is business. So trade and commerce connects villages with towns. Apart from that, services. Or service sector also connects or links town with villages. How? Now see, rural area or villages mostly deals with agricultural products, or most of the raw materials are found in the rural areas. So we can say that villages supply agricultural products or raw materials to towns, and in return town provide the village or the people living in the village with essential commodities and other services. Services such as banking, postal service, educational institution, now these services also connects the villages with town, and also people of villages move to town to buy their necessary items. And at present, if you see, village and towns are also linked with the help of phone, internet and other media. So this is the relation between town and village. Now that we know that there is a strong linkage between village and towns, but if there would have been no linkage, or if there is the absence of linkage between town and villages, then there may arise certain or several problems. Now what kind of problem may arise if there is an absence of linkage between town and villages? First of all, the problem that may arise is there may not be exchange of trade and commerce. That is, people in villages may not be able to sell their product in town, and in return town may not be able to sell any final product to village. Then towns may not get raw materials for industries. Then services, like example banks, postal service, may not reach the village, and as a result the people living in village may face some problem, or their life will not be that easy. But today, because of the linkage, we have both banks and postal service and other services also in villages. Then even schools are there in villages. And transport problem. If the linkage is not there between towns and villages, then there may be transport problem. People living in the villages may find it difficult to reach the town to buy their necessary items. Not only that, even if the people of villages want to travel to town for medical help, they would face problem because of transport problem. Now, if we have to compare the population between town and villages, then we have seen, or we see that towns or urban areas have more population. Now, what is the reason behind why towns have more population? Now, towns have more population because, number one, towns have better scope of job opportunities. Compared to villages. Then towns have many school, colleges and even hospitals, and that's the reason why people settle down more in towns to avail these facilities. Then in towns we have better mode of transportation. To move from one place to another, and that's the reason why people prefer to come in and settle down in towns, and that increases the population in towns. Then service sectors. Towns have more service sectors such as banking, several organizations, firms, and even industries where people can engage themselves in different kinds of activities and earn their living. And that's the reason why population in town is more compared to villages. Now we will learn about settlement in uplands and lowlands. So uplands means hilly region or mountainous region. Now for example, Nagaland, Sikkim, or in fact even Karbi Anglong of Assam falls in uplands. Now in these places or in the hilly areas, in these places the population or the settlement is not very thick or dense. It is sparse. Whereas in the plain areas of Assam, say Brahmaputra or the Barak Valley, Punjab, Bihar, Haryana, now they fall in the Indo-Gangetic plain. Now they are lowlands, and here the population is quite dense. So if you remember, we discussed about types of settlement: nuclear, sparse, star. So dispersed or the sparse settlement you'll find in these places, whereas nucleated, linear, square you'll find in lowlands. Now there are some differences between the settlement in uplands and lowlands. Now what are they? Let's discuss about that. Now, as I've told you, one, that in uplands the population is quite sparse or dispersed, but whereas in lowland the population is quite dense. Then here population is sparse. Here population is dense. Then in uplands mode of transport is not favorable, whereas here transport is better or favorable. In uplands there is less scope of trade and commerce, but in lowland we have high scope of trade and commerce. So these are few examples or differences between upland and lowland. Then let's add one more. In uplands, people do engage themselves in agriculture, but there is no major crop. In uplands, we do not have any major crop, but they grow all kinds of crop, but they don't have any major crop. But in lowlands, we have some major crops which they grow in their field. That is, major crop is what? Rice or wheat at some places. Then when it comes to land, in upland people do not cultivate their crops at one particular place, but in lowland we have, or they practice, extensive agriculture where they keep on growing crops again and again in the same plot. But this does not happen in upland. For a couple of years they start doing farming in a particular plot of land, and after 2 or 3 years they move from that particular plot of land to another, which is also known as shifting cultivation, and this is being practiced in upland. So now let's recall what we have learned. So we learned that in developed countries 70% of the population lives in urban areas, but if we compare those developed countries with India, then in India 30% of the total population lives in urban areas, whereas 70% of the population lives in rural areas. Then we also learned that there is strong relation between town and villages, and because of which both urban and rural settlement grows. Then we also learned that if there is an absence of linkage between the rural and the urban settlement, then there may arise few problems, and the problems we have discussed. What kind of problems may arise because of the absence of linkage. Then we also discuss the reason why more population is found in urban settlement or in towns. Now, at the end, I shall give you some questions and make sure that you find those answers from these videos and then you write them in your fair copy. Make sure to keep your answer short and specific.